Good morning, everybody. My name is Liliana Sanchez, and today I would like to share my story and the journey that I had to travel to find and affirm my roots, to reconnect and remember my multiple identities. This journey involved confronting and disrupting some of the fearsome barriers designed to silence me, diminish me, and limit me, and to some extent, make me invisible. I'll share my experiences and the implications for how we can better support our students. Who am I, and who gets to define who I am and what my journey should be? As a woman, as a young woman, as a young woman of color, as a young woman of mixed heritage, as a young woman who is bilingual in all of these layers, there is plenty of room to confuse the definers, and believe me, they are all around us, even among those who are supposed to be our advocates, our teachers, our mentors. The results can be understood more fully through the notion of intersectionality, a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. According to Crenshaw, intersectionality is a theoretical framework that describes the way that various social identities, such as race, gender, language, and more, overlap to create unique experiences for individuals. It's a way to understand how these identities intersect to create systems of oppression and privilege. As Crenshaw explains, mapping these intersections can help us disrupt the tendency to see any of these singular identities as exclusive or separable. I grew up in a small Central Valley town where most of the population was poor and Latino, and where that was essentially equivalent to being uneducated. In that context, my family was in the minority. I come from a professional family, one generation away from first-generation immigrants, where education was considered essential to upward mobility and success. Truthfully, we were among the more affluent residents. So in school, I was always considered smart, rich, and motivated. And that did not always position me in an affirmative light. For example, my family valued travel as a way to experience a broader world not available in my town, and as an important learning opportunity. But when I shared my travel experiences with my peers, their response left me feeling dehumanized and belittled. When I talked about traveling to Turkey, I was met with comments such as, "You were in a Turkey?" which were not meant literally, rather they were meant to make fun of me. When I shared that I would be spending a year in Jordan, some of the comments that I received were, "Are you going to have to wear that thing under your head? And are you going to ride a camel to school every day?" More than anything, these types of comments made me feel other and isolated. And because I'm mixed, there were any number of hurtful slurs launched at me, slurs that exactly demonstrated that for the most part, my peers could not comprehend the notion of intersectionality, something none of my teachers addressed, and viewed identities as singular and static. When I wore my hair in box braids, I was challenged, for example, by white peers who decreed that I wasn't black, so I couldn't wear braids. On another day, a boy in my sixth grade class actually yelled to the teacher, "Can you tell this Nigerian woman to shut up?" While individually things like this were hurtful, they were also beyond confusing, causing internal struggle within me and issues about my own sense of where I belonged. While some may see these as individual and not particular important events, for me, the cumulative effect became a barrage of assaults on my sense of identity and self-confidence. These assaults continued into high school, and it was only then that I received the language to classify them as microaggressions, and to better understand why they had such a powerful effect on me. And most importantly, that I was not experiencing an individual assault, but rather this was a collective experience shared by many others. I was not crazy, and I wasn't alone in that craziness. Given all of this, there were two things that happened that dramatically changed my life trajectory. First, in middle school, I had started learning Arabic through a series of summer programs and became very interested in the Middle East. Because of this, we learned about King's Academy, a private prep school type institution in Jordan, and because COVID had just hit the US and other schools were moving to an online format, it was decided that I should apply to King's in order to experience a richer learning experience, and in that process also expand my Arabic and my knowledge of Middle Eastern culture and the arts. I was accepted and spent my sophomore year at King's. There, my sense of identity went through another transformation. King's is a private school literally sponsored by the King of Jordan. Students who attend King's are, by large, very wealthy and privileged. So when I went there, I became from being the smart, rich, motivated student in my town to being the poor, not very well educated outsider at King's. This was devastating to my already shaky sense of identity and belonging, and it largely overshadowed my ability to fully participate in the academic, cultural, and social riches offered by King's. I felt that my family had made a wrong choice for me. Going to King's was largely their decision, and as the time to leave got closer, I had increasing feelings that I shouldn't go, that I wasn't ready, but my family's decision prevailed. That ambivalence and the reality of King's combined to create in me a huge feeling of betrayal that only compounded the other issues and further eroded my sense of self-confidence. I returned to my hometown for my junior and senior years with the renewed desire to explore and cement the African American part of my identity, and that led directly to the second big change. In middle school, I had learned about the HBCUs and Spelman College, a well-known and highly regarded private, historically Black women's liberal arts college in Atlanta, Georgia. I remember thinking that if I was accepted to the #1 rated HBCU, the assaults on my identity would stop because no one would be able to tell me that I wasn't Black. That, unfortunately, became my overriding motivation for attending Spelman. But from the time I arrived on the Spelman campus, it became clear that I had misjudged how much I would belong or wanted to belong to the Spelman community. I had not counted on the fact that Spelman has a large legacy population, and there were women there for whom attending Spelman was part of a generational tradition. There was no way I could compete with that if my true passion in attending Spelman was solely set in being seen as a Black woman. There, too, I was confronted with my own stereotypes of what Black women are. In a sense, I had brought with me my own ignorance about the diversity in my community and the African diaspora. Once again, I needed to rethink my identity and that journey. It was difficult to come to the realization that Spelman was not the panacea I had longed for, and I needed to take a new path. On a side note, it was at Spelman that I began to acquire the language I needed to explain and make sense of what was happening to me, of things like intersectionality. Why don't we give our students, from the time they come into our schools, the language that they need to make sense of their experiences? That new path led me back to California, where there was a greater possibility of bringing my Latina and African American cultures together to help me establish a clearer sense of my own diverse and multifaceted identity. And here I am. So, given my experiences, which are mirrored by the experiences of so many students like me, what can we do? There is a way forward, but it requires shifting and expanding our understanding of identity and its relation to everything. After all, identity is a complex and fundamental concept composed of a unique set of characteristics that allows us to know who and how we are, that gives us the framework for understanding our place in the world and how we fit into it. That includes our values, beliefs, experiences, interests, personality traits, appearances, and how we see ourselves in the world. In addition to our self-identity, it also includes our social identity. From the time we are children, our identity is constantly evolving based on the interactions that we experience and how we interpret the meaning of those interactions. And for so many of us who are seen as other, our identity is a vulnerable and fragile thing. Educators, especially, need to take care that their words and actions, or their silence and inaction, don't damage, undermine, hinder, or circumscribe the development of a full and healthy identity. Because when our identity is made small, we see ourselves as small. And when our identity is made invisible, we see ourselves as invisible, and our sense of potential and possibility suffer. Sometimes I hear people say that teachers are not miracle workers, that they can't do everything. Perhaps that's true in a larger sense, but when we're talking about their relationships with their students, they can do so much more than they imagine. It's critical for educators, especially teachers, to deeply understand that what they say and do has consequence. They can be instrumental in radical acts of remembering, recovering, and repairing. We can think of these as the radical 3 R's. Let me say a few words about each of these. When I talk about remembering, I'm very specifically positioning remembering as an antidote to dismembering. I mean remembering in the sense of reconnecting all those parts of our identities that we need to be fully functioning human beings in the world. For example, educators can create classroom activities that directly engage students in affirming their identities and reflecting on their place in the world. They can create space for students to bring their whole selves, including their family histories, traditions, languages, and cultures, into the classroom. And when I talk about recovering, I'm talking about healing in the sense that reconnects it to wholeness, health, and holiness. All 4 of these words are related because they all come from the Old English root ha, which means whole or uninjured. Talk about intersectionality. The interconnectedness of these words suggests that well-being is multifaceted and encompasses physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. How can educators support students to be whole, healthy, to heal, and ultimately to achieve holiness in the sense of reaching their sacred potential? Using the example I just shared with regard to remembering, we can take that one step further and directly acknowledge students' experiences in physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions as legitimate resources and sources to knowledge, not just use these because it's February or Dia de los Muertos. Who we are is not an episodic experience. When Black History Month is over, we are still Black and dealing with the traumas of living while Black in a system not made to uplift people like us. And to experience my history as only filled with trauma and struggle in itself creates additional trauma. In order to heal, to be whole, to be healthy, I need to know that joy does exist for me and people like me, that we have a vibrant history of resistance, as well as the more well-known history of oppression. Educators can help us experience joy in who we are. And then we come to our 3rd R, repairing. I use the word repairing to reflect the idea of reparation and restoration. Both words share the same Latin root, reparare, which means to restore, signifying the act of fixing or making amends for something damaged or wronged. In my mind, this has a future tense. Educators can play a special role in helping right the wrongs of our history. As Maya Angelou said, history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. If we acknowledge our past, our history, we can learn how to create a better future. And to quote Spanish poet Antonio Machado, caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. It can be as simple as this. Educators, be our advocates and allies. Help us become leaders in our lives, in our communities, and in our world. Make space for us to be seen and heard with respect and legitimacy. Do so by helping us move from your classrooms into larger venues in the school and the community so that more powerful others begin to see us in a positive light. And there's a particularly powerful thing we can do around repairing that has to do with how we respond to the cultural realities of students, how we value or don't Black and brown contributions to evaluation and assessment in particular. We'll hear much more about this later this morning, but we can't ignore that when we don't value something, it's difficult for us to assess it in a positive manner. When we don't value something, it's even difficult for us to actually see it at all. We have to confront this. We have to figure out how to analyze the systems and methods of assessment we're currently using to repair those so that they're much more culturally and linguistically responsive. Radical, right? Well, as educators, we have to commit to being radicals. After all, the word radical comes from the Latin word radix, which means root. A radical is considered the fundamental or basic part of something, just like a root is the base of a plant. And you, the educators, are the root of how our young people can grow into healthy human beings. It's through you that students can be anchored firmly in their lives and receive the water and nutrients they need to grow strong, to survive through droughts and winds and other changes that may swirl around them. And who are the educators? Educators are all of us. If you're someone passionate about transforming education, don't file this away in a conference folder that you'll only see again when you're cleaning out your junk drawer. You can use this in all aspects of your lives. Remember, we are not here simply to preserve our existing institutions. Rather, we have responsibility to challenge injustice. So be brave, become a radical, and take on the 3 R's: remember, recover, and repair. When we're able to do that, when we dare to step outside of what is, we will find that all roads lead to liberation. Thank you.